There we go. Sorry about that, folks. Little snafu there with my mixer again. Got to switch to a digital mixer.
Sorry about that, folks. Little snafu
So welcome
there with
back.
my mixer again. Got to switch to a
There we
digital
go.
mixer.
Why am I
Sorry
getting-
about that, folks. Little
So
snafu
welcome
there with
back.
my mixer again. Got to switch to a
I
digital
can
mixer.
hear you
Why am I
fine.
getting- I think I'm getting a reverb on the other end. Can you turn your or is that my end?
Why
Am I
fine.
getting? I think I'm getting a reverb on the other end. There we go. Got it. Okay. Sorry about that. Ladies and gentlemen, sorry about the rocky start there. Welcome back. This is Chris with Indaba Africa, and it's a pleasure to have everybody back here today. My special guest is Scott Balson, the owner, moderator, founder of Loving Life, a very popular channel that covers events, especially in South Africa. Going to bring him in just a moment. We're going to talk to him for the next hour or so about his life, his experiences, and why his great interest in South Africa. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let me go ahead and bring Scott on board here. All right. I'm having an awkward day here. Sorry about this, Scott. There you are. Welcome, Scott.
Hi, how are you?
Excellent. Boy, it sounds like you're right next to me. You're completely on the other side of the world, and it sounds like you're right next to me.
I don't think we could be further apart.
No, it's an ungodly hour where you're sitting at, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about 4 o'clock in the morning, but I'm used to it now.
Well, that's the thing. You know, people, when you do these YouTube streams and you have a channel, people don't often realize that, it's from all over the world. So you got people tuning in from all over the planet. And I suppose when we reach the moon and Mars, it'll be even more challenging.
Yeah. Well, time zones can be a real hassle, let's face it.
They can indeed. So, Scott, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? You were born in Tanganyika, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, I was. Well, I was born in Dar es Salaam in Tanganyika back in 1955. Now I'm giving my age away. I'm an old fart.
Ouch. You weren't supposed to do that. Okay. That was a state secret.
I don't have any secrets.
I'll have to erase that part of the tape.
And I have to tell you that growing up in Tanganyika was fabulous. It was such a free lifestyle. It was just absolutely extraordinary. I remember some of my biggest memories are playing in the garden beds, because there wasn't much of a garden. There was a lot of soil. And my brother and I used to play soldiers, and we had these tiny little plastic soldiers that we used to put up, and then we had these little cannons, and we put matches in them, and we fired them at each other's soldiers. And that was a lot of fun. And it was just such a free lifestyle. But that all changed when at the age of 6, my parents said to me, basically, you can't get an education here in East Africa, so we're sending you off to boarding school. So they sent me to Michael House, Cornwallis first, which is a boarding school in Pietermaritzburg, and then after that to Michael House. And Michael House wasn't much fun, I can assure you. I got caned quite a bit for just about anything. It was just, the old days of the cane.
So were you were you a naughty child, or is that just what everybody got?
Oh, no, it was just the system. For example, at Michael House in the first year, you were called a cack. And a cack is apparently the yolk of an egg, or the lowest form of life. And as a cack, you had to fag for one of the prefects. And I fagged for a guy by the name of Hallows, who was actually the bishop's son, believe it or not. And what this guy used to do is he used to give me, and if you got 10 black marks, you got caned. And what he would do is in the first 3 days of the term, he would give me 8 black marks, which meant if I got 2 more, and for the whole of the rest of the term, I'd be waiting during prep, because that's when they called you up to Scully's to get caned. I would be waiting every night to be called up to Scully's. It was incredibly, draining, believe me. But that was life. That was life at boarding school.
Well, I see you were pretty upbeat about what must have been an unpleasant experience with the caning. So,
it was a long time ago now.
Oh, okay. It's buried somewhere in the deep recesses in the back of the hard drive. So what I did want to ask you then is, since you left Tanganyika at the age of 6 to go to South Africa to go to school, you did your primary and secondary schooling there. Did you go back to Tanganyika at some point, or because I don't know if you speak Swahili, but you certainly are familiar with Swahili. Do you speak it as well?
I speak a little.
Okay.
I know all the all the bad words. I remember. You're a naughty boy, or go home. Those sort of things I guess I wasn't making friends fast in Tanganyika.
When I learned when I was learning Swahili at university, we had the Longman primers for primary school, and they had the little
Yeah.
cartoons in them, of course. And so you had all these names like the some of the people were like Kip Langat and others with names like that. And then of course we always had in some place in the story about the bad goats Mbuzi Wawili because they were always eating the clothes on the clothesline. So that's what I remember about Swahili.
Yeah.
So did you actually go back to Tanganyika at some point, or did you move on from there after South Africa?
Yes, I did actually. In 2016, I went back there, and it was a long break between the, from when I left as a child, and I was very, very disappointed because I remember how it used to be, and it must have been about 55 years later. It had changed so dramatically, I couldn't recognize it. Dar es Salaam, for example, used to be this beautiful little city, and now it extends for about 50 miles around the port. It's just extraordinary. And it's all these little shanties, and it's the pollution.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
Pollution is terrible there.
Yeah, that kind of caught my attention when I was in Dar. I knew it was big, but I didn't realize from the air you just see how much it extends now. And it was exactly a small little town. I didn't have experience with it, but what I knew about it was from photographs from the First World War when it was still a German colony and seeing the size of Dar. And it's like, that's like a little tiny neighborhood of what Dar es Salaam is these days. It's massive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you went to school in South Africa. And after you graduated from secondary school, did you go on to university or did you get busy in life and start doing things? What happened?
No, I never went to university because what happened was my parents, having gone down to South Africa as well, they basically lost everything. And my brother was at university, and it's a very expensive thing, so they couldn't afford to send me to university. But that was fine. I went and I worked at Barclays Bank for 10 years, and that had some really happy memories. It was a lot of fun working in the bank. And then after that, I moved to Johannesburg and worked on Where magazine, which was interesting because Johannesburg was the first real big city I'd ever lived in. And wow, was that a shake-up for me. I mean, just all those traffic lights and these tall buildings, and, it was just, it was crazy.
Now, Scott, before my subscribers start going after you, it's not called a traffic light. It's a robot.
Yeah.
No, we have a little bit of fun.
Guys.
No, we have a little bit of fun with that. It's the South Africans and the Afrikaans-speaking South Africans have a lot of fun. They have a go at me because of my mispronunciation of the impronounceable G sound in Afrikaans, which is I always messing that up. So
you mean words like "gatvol"?
Exactly. Yeah,
I've got it down to the T.
Well, that one I do pretty well at Gatvol, but it's a few other ones I have a hard time with. I've got someone that's on the channel. His name is Gerhard. I mean, it's a German name, and that's how you pronounce it. Gerhard in German. You pronounce the D like a T at the end. And so they kind of chuckle like at me because it's actually Gerhard or something like that. But anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So you did actually live in South Africa for a while then. You were in school for probably at least a couple decades you lived in South Africa.
Yeah, I was actually in my early 30s when I moved to Australia.
Okay. And I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I moved to Perth originally, and I was very happy to leave. But I have to tell you a little story about going through the Australian Embassy.
Okay.
It was in about October 1985 that I first contacted the Australian Embassy. And they were in Pretoria. I was in Krugersdorp, which is about an hour's drive from Pretoria. Mm-hmm. And in those times, you could still get directly through to someone at the embassy. And I spoke to this person. They said, that's fine. We'll send you the forms. Fill in this or keep this number, this reference number. So I kept the reference number, sent the forms in. And about a month later, I was invited in for an interview so they could sort of see if I was a man of good character, if I could put it that way. And there was this guy by the name of Henry Google. What a name. Google. No, that's not Google as in the search engine.
Yeah,
it was G-U-G-E-L.
I'll bet he wishes he had some stock in Google or Alphabet, the parent company.
He does. But anyway, Henry was a really mean sort. You know, when you walked into the interview, I mean, his opening gambit was, you realize, Charles, that you cannot go and shoot black people in the streets in Australia. That was his opening gambit.
Yikes.
So I said, what? You know, I grew up in East Africa, and I had little black fellows as my friends and stuff like that. And so anyway, that was the opening gambit. And I realized that everybody who he spoke to would probably be grilled like we had. Mm-hmm. So what I did was I went to CNA and I bought the nicest Christmas card I could find. Now, I should tell you that he said to me when we left that there's a 2-year waiting list to actually, you know, get accepted into Australia. So what I did was I went to CNA, got this beautiful Christmas card, and it said, to Henry Google, from, and then I carefully spelt out my name. And I said, thank you for everything you're doing for us. And I posted it off to him. And it's probably the best move I ever made, because early in January, I got a phone call from the embassy. And clearly my file had gone right to the top because it said, you know, you've been approved. It was quite incredible.
No, it's, you know, it's an art that's lost on people, particularly in the digital age. I mean, I'm not going to claim that I write letters anymore. It's mostly emails, but I do write letters as a thank you to someone for a professional purpose. And people, that art has sort of been lost on people. They don't realize the personal touch and the difference it makes. You know, when you put forward a good first impression. I remember after I got out of the Army, went back to university, I applied for a job with the United Parcel Service, UPS, and it was Christmas hire, and they didn't have any positions, but I showed up wearing a tie at university with short hair, and I made a one-page CV because it was early in life. I didn't have much to put on it, but I put down my experience, and so I obviously impressed the interviewer because he called me about 6 months later and said, listen, are you available to work this summer? We have a job. And I said, no, I'm not. I'll be gone all summer for military training, but I'll be back in the fall. And he goes, well, I'll tell you what, we might have something in the fall. I'll get back in touch with you. And I'm thinking, you know, of course, there's no mobile phones, no email. This is calling your landline. And I'm thinking, I'll never hear from this guy. Sure enough, August, he calls me back and says, are you interested in a job? 35 hours a week, $9 an hour. I'm like, yeah, gee, thanks. I was able to buy a new car when I was at university and pay most of it because I had the money, and then also get myself a new computer and everything. So it was, but the point is like you sent this personal note into him, this card, and it showed you're professional, you're a serious person, and it makes a world of difference. And I think people these days of all generations really don't get that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's see, what else can we talk about when it comes to that? So you went to South Africa and you were in Perth. There's a lot of Afrikaners in Perth. I think 16 or 20,000 of them hanging out there.
No, it's more than that. It's a huge population of South Africans in Perth. Huge, absolutely huge.
And so are you still in that part of the country now, or you live elsewhere?
No, I actually was in Perth for about 5 years, and it was actually in Perth that I set up my company.
Okay.
Which is involved in computer-based marketing. And it was the first company in Australia to actually get into computer-based marketing. And in 1994, what happened was that the business manager of Ipswich City Council heard about my company and what I was doing, and he invited me across to Queensland to actually have a look at setting up basically the networked city of Ipswich, so doing everything on a computer. And they offered me a lot of money, so I said, yeah, I'll do that. So I actually moved to Queensland, and I preferred Queensland to Perth, so I stayed in Queensland. And yes, I helped them set up what was called Global Infolinks back in 1994. And after my contract was finished, the internet had just discovered the web.
Exactly.
Of course, that changed everything. So what I did was I set up a web building company back in 1995, and it was the first web building company in Queensland. And I ran that company for 20 years, up until 2015.
Wow. So you were doing IT before IT was cool.
Yeah, Absolutely.
I-
And I was totally self-taught.
Well, that's actually, I think that in some respects that's the discovery learning when it comes to IT or coding or building computers or building networks. I think that's really an important part of it. That's how I learned to build computers. That's how I learned to code on my own. Didn't learn it
Yeah.
from anybody. Occasionally you get a book or something like that just to learn a few key things. But yeah, I think that makes a big difference. So you're mentioning places. So Perth, Western Force, Queensland, the Queensland Reds. I'm a rugby.
I can see what you're into.
Yeah, I'm a rugby fan. So actually wearing a rugby jersey today, USA, but this is a Sevens jersey. So do you follow sport at all? Are you a rugby fan or no?
Uh, when I've got a free moment, I do, but I don't get many free moments because of the YouTube channels. So when I do follow sport, funny enough, it's darts because I've got access to the professional darts league on my, well, it's closed down now because of lockdown, but normally they have these fantastic sessions and, they get 180 and 180 and 180 and I'm flat out getting 26, if you know what I mean, in darts.
That's not very good, Scott. I wouldn't share that with folks. But the darts, I get it. Look, that's a game you can get behind. I mean, when I think of darts, I'm thinking of a pub and a pint. I mean, that's not a bad deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
this guy Phil Taylor
uh-huh.
was the world champion in darts for 26 years. I think it's a world record in any sport.
Wow.
And the new guy is Michael van Gerwen, who's a pretty good dart player as well.
Wow. Well, that's something interesting I didn't expect to learn a little bit about darts today. Now, does darts have some unusual sporting name or game name that I've never heard of? Some of these games you find out. It's like you learn about things. I remember years ago when I learned about, it's not a flock of ravens, it's an unkindness of ravens. I was like, wow, that's really cool. But is there a different sort of name for darts, or do we just call it darts?
Oh, we just call it darts. That's all we call it here. Yeah.
Makes sense. So there's a few things in the chat I want to cover real quick. Michaela
Sure.
said she was also amused to find traffic lights in the U.S. strung on cables overhead. She said theirs in South Africa on upright poles cemented in the side of the road. Well, yes, Michaela, some of ours are also cemented on poles on the side of the road. It just depends where you're at. But yes, most of ours are actually overhead. I've only been to the airport in Sydney in Australia. I've yet to make a good trip around Oz on my way to the World Cup in New Zealand in 2011. So I don't know what your lights are like. What do your robots look like there in South Africa? Are they overhead or are they on a pole or what's the deal? Or do you don't have any because it's not enough traffic?
You're talking to me in Australia or South Africa?
No, Australia. No, I know. We both know South Africa. I don't know Australia. All I know is that from watching, what was that show back in the 80s? There was a soap opera in the 80s in Australia that came here in the States, Return to Eden. I remember that, Return to Eden, and some of the other programs. But no, so what are lights like there? I know it's kind of an esoteric question, but I just thought I'd ask it off the top of the head there.
Well, I've been to the US.
Yep.
And as they say in Texas, everything is bigger and better. But our traffic lights tend to be a little bit smaller. I mean, your traffic lights in America are so big and bold, you can't miss them. Ours tend to be, as I say, a little bit smaller, but they're exactly the same in format. There is one complaint I have about America, though.
What's that?
And that is that you drive on the wrong side of the road.
You've been watching my streams. I keep pointing out to people in Commonwealth countries, you're on the wrong side of the road. No, but seriously. So you went to Australia. You're involved in IT. So you've been at this for a long time. Well, let's talk about loving life, if you don't mind. Is that okay?
Sure.
So I first heard about your channel a couple years ago. I was doing a search for something in South Africa, and one of your videos turned up. It must have been right after you started the South Africa portion of it. And I watched the video. I was like, this is interesting. And then like a lot of people on YouTube, I wasn't really back and didn't see it again. And then became aware that you've been incredibly busy producing a lot of videos, prepared videos in South Africa. And also you do live streams, and you have this music jam show, which we're trying to get Giselle coming on your program. That should be exciting.
Yeah, she's coming on tomorrow night.
Oh, she is? Okay, I'm going to have to call them and give them a hard time. I think they've missed the part that I'm their international booking manager. So Johan, I'm going to have to straighten him out. He can book gigs for her in South Africa and Namibia, but I do the international stuff. So
Well, anyway. Johan never mentioned that to me.
Well, no, he wouldn't. No, but seriously. Okay, folks, listen. That's fantastic news to hear that Giselle will be appearing on Loving Life tomorrow. I will definitely be watching
and that's
that.
thanks to you, by the way.
Well, no, you're welcome. It was my pleasure to introduce her. So many people don't know who she is. People who speak Afrikaans or listen to Afrikaans music are unaware of her, and it's a shame because she is incredibly talented. I think you watched the stream on my channel that for her concert. It's just really amazing music.
I'll be putting up one of her videos, music videos, as a teaser later on today.
Well, let me warn you ahead of time. Be prepared for the Yoo-hoo copyright claim, because you're going to get it, even if you have the permission. I use her videos on my live streams all the time, and I always have to go and do the admin stuff to take care of that. So
Yeah.
that happens after the fact. So that's fantastic. Good to hear that. Okay, so your channel. I think you've got a couple different channels, like 3 of them there. But can you tell me about the
Yeah.
South Africa channel and the origin of it, and obviously why you have it? I understand why you have an interest in South Africa, but where did the channel come from?
Okay, I set up my YouTube channels in the early 2000s, and I really did nothing with them. I was like many people. I just had this channel. I put a couple of videos up there from my travels, and that was about it. But I was reading in the paper one day in about April 2018 that the ANC were trying to take or claiming that land had been stolen off them. And I'd written the book Children of the Mist and knew South African history really, really well, and knew that that was a load of crap, because the only place that the Bantu and Nguni people had been was right on the east coast at KwaZulu-Natal. They were actually brought into the center of South Africa by business and mines and stuff like that. There were a few right up in the northern part of South Africa, but that was about it. And they went down to the Fish River, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I put up a video basically spelling out the truth of the history of land ownership in South Africa. And for some reason, that video went viral. It's got well over 500,000 views on it right now. And, once it went viral, I thought, wow, this is kind of cool. So I started putting up the odd video about South Africa, and I probably put about one up every week or one up or every few days. And I started getting subscribers. And so it was just a slow march from there. And after about 5 or 6 months, I think I had 1,000 subscribers. And I thought, well, I'm retired. I've got nothing to do all day long. What I'm going to do is I'm going to concentrate on this channel. So that's when I started putting up several videos a day, and that's where it built up from.
That's pretty interesting. Now, you were talking about you had a book published, Children of the Mist. I'm actually I'm sorry I was going to hold it up and show you, but it's downstairs because I moved things around when I finished working at the War College a few months ago, and so I was trying to find it. But I have a copy of Children of the Mist. Fantastic book talking about the history of the Griqua people. And what was the motivation for that? I mean, there's not much literature that's out there on the Griqua people or colored history in general. So can you tell us a little bit where that came from?
Sure. When I was working at Barclays Bank in Akopo, when I was about, I must have been in my late teens, I suppose, or early 20s. And what happened was I was sent to the bank agency at Umzimkulu. And I met this fellow who was the managing director of Strachan and Company. And because I was a coin collector, I said to him, you got all these shops all around East Griqualand. Do you have any old silver coins? And he said, no, we don't have any of those, but I've got something far more interesting. Then he told me about the token coins that his company had issued way back from about the mid-1870s through to about the 1920s. And I was fascinated by this. So I actually, on my Wednesday afternoons when the bank wasn't open, I used to drive down to Umzimkulu and spend time in his offices and going through the coins and stuff like that. And it was there where I started learning about the Griqua people, because they were, a lot of Griquas in that particular area. And because of the coins and because they'd been used in places like Kokstad, I decided that I would write basically a little booklet about these coins, which I did. And it was called Kenjle, or Kens. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because it's an onomatopoeia for the name of two coins knocking together. And once I'd done that, basically I always thought, it'd be fascinating to do a history on the Griqua people. And I started buying all these old first edition books and putting all the bits of the jigsaw together, which came out in that book, Children of the Mist.
So the book, book projects, they're not exactly an overnight venture. So my question is, how long did you work on the book? I mean, it must have taken you a few years, if not many years, to gather all of the primary sources, secondary sources, to be able to tell this narrative.
That's a really good question. I have to tell you why, because I started this book when I was back in South Africa, and I was living in Krugersdorp.
Wow.
And what happened was when I moved to Perth, I kind of shelved the whole project because I was building up my company and doing what I was doing. And it was about early 2000 that I thought, hey, I've got to get back into this thing. So I pulled out the manuscript, and I had to, because I'd done it on a typewriter. You take a document from a typewriter and you have to type it into a computer. It's a lot of work, especially when it's about 150 pages. So that took me about a week. But then I just started. The beauty about being on a computer is you can actually change things so easily, whereas on a typewriter, you're stuffed. So, so I did that for a few years. And then in 2006, I decided that I would bring out a hard copy edition, which there were only 20 copies of. And I went around South Africa giving this to museums and giving it to the Griqua people. So it was just like a pre-run for the next year when I actually launched Children of the Mist. I traveled around the country and I spoke at the Santon Library. I spoke at the Killie Campbell Museum in Durban. At Rhodes University, I had a launch there. So I was all over the country launching the book.
So I'm going to guess that you're probably popular with the Griqua people. I mean, this book's been well received by them, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, when I had my launch at Kranshoek, which is near Plettenberg Bay, they had a special evening for me, and it was so lovely. They all came in, and the Griqua choir were there, all dressed with their little white bonnets or whatever they're called, the old traditional Afrikaans little white bonnet, and they always wore white as a choir. And they sang the Griqua anthem for me, which was absolutely amazing. And I was able to record that, and I actually put it up on my channel back then. That was one of my first videos I put up on my channel.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So when you did the book, obviously we talked primary and secondary sources, and you purchased these rare books that were out there. But I imagine also oral history plays an important part, particularly for people whose history isn't particularly well documented in written documents. Was that a part of your research, oral history with elders and those who passed down stories?
No,
oh,
unfortunately not, because of
shame.
the geographic distance.
Well, yeah, that's true, because you said you started in South Africa and then you really finished it later on. So, well, that's a shame. That's interesting stuff. Oral history. A lot of times people discount oral history, and they, like the Viking sagas, the Icelandic sagas. They said, oh, it's just a bunch of nonsense, and yeah, there's a bunch of nonsense in there, but it's a very accurate history actually, as they find out through archaeology. Archaeology and through DNA after the fact, they find out oral history can, in fact, have a lot of reality to it. So I was just curious about that with the book. And what did you?
I'll tell you the problem with the Griquas is that they are actually the result of interbreeding between the first settlers and the Hottentots or the Khoi people.
Yeah.
Excuse me. That's their origins, and their history really started in 1652 or thereabouts, when Jan van Riebeck arrived to Mr. Ramaphosa blames for everything under the sun.
No, Scott, you missed it. Apparently, Tito Mboweni has resolved the situation. Apparently, it's no longer Jan van Riebeck's fault. It's all King George's fault, and we've jumped from 1652 to 1920, and that's the reason the ANC is failing, because of King George, not Jan van Riebeck. You might have missed that in the budget speech. I'm just sharing that with you.
Yeah, well, that's a 300-year jump. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. We're getting closer.
Yeah.
That is funny, though.
Next, it'll be the coronavirus, believe me.
Well, of course, it's coronavirus. Yeah, of course it is. That's the effort to get Orange Man bad here on this side of the Atlantic, this side of the Pacific from where you're at. Yeah, absolutely. That's the goal, is to get rid of Orange Man bad. So there's a couple things in the chat I wanted to mention very quickly. So Hendo says that Afrikaans is his mother tongue, but English is better for him now. Afrikaans is mijn oorspronkelijke taal, maar Engels is no better. Now they're going to get
my Afrikaans is niet goed nie.
Yeah, well, they're going to get a kick out of both of us speaking Afrikaans, although yours is a little bit better. You've actually spent more days in South Africa than I could ever imagine
Yeah.
than I have.
That would be painful, us both talking Afrikaans, believe me.
Yeah, and then Scott, if you don't mind me asking, well, before I do that, let me do a little bit of housekeeping, folks. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Indaba Africa. This is Chris Wyatt on the Chris Wyatt Africa channel. I'm here in central Pennsylvania, and at an ungodly hour in Australia is my guest tonight, my special featured guest, Scott Balson, who's up in the middle of the night or early morning. And so I'm so grateful he's on with me tonight. I was a guest on his program last Sunday, and he's paying it back. He's a guest on my program, having a very interesting discussion. If you're just tuning in, if you've never watched this channel before, it's about geostrategic issues, specifically the U.S., Africa, and also China to some degree, but big geopolitical issues. There is a strong focus on South Africa because of large subscriber base from South Africa, and also it's a fascinating country. And hence one of the reasons why I brought Scott on. He's in Australia, I'm in the U.S., and we're talking about South Africa. So there you have it. But if you're not a subscriber to the channel, take a second and smash that little subscription button right down there. We just went over 4,000 subscribers. Back in February, I had 2 people subscribe to my channel, and here we are at 4,000. So somebody's interested.
Well done.
Well, thanks. Somebody's interested in the things that we're saying. So please feel free to subscribe to the channel, and if you'd like, you can become a member of the channel too. No, I'm not e-begging. I'm just making a point out there to let people know that you can become a member, because my subscribers ask for it. They want to be part of something. So, like, the entry level thing is like, 10 Rand if you want to join. You're in South Africa. Anyway, and that's the end of that. But feel free to subscribe to the channel, because it really makes a difference. The more people wear the channel, the more word we get out. And I will actually be putting up more things on U.S. politics in the future, but I've been reticent because of shadow banning here in the States and people being cut off. For instance, I did 3 videos this morning. The first 2 were announced to people. My third video, which was on U.S. politics, nobody got an announcement that I was premiering it, including me. So I'm a little reticent on it. But a lot of people have been asking for U.S. politics and feedback on that. And just for your own notification, I'm a retired U.S. Army colonel, 36 and a half years, 34 of those active service. Served 3 tours in Germany, 1 in Italy. Served 8 tours in Africa, worked at the Defense Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency. So I bring all that analytical stuff to the table, and I might not be right, but at least it's an informed wrongness if it's wrong. Anyway, so back to the conversation. So Scott and I were just talking here about his experience writing a book called The Children of the Mist about the Griqua people in South Africa. And I think I just mentioned that it's no longer Jan van Riebeck's fault, so we jumped ahead. But the Griquas, they were kind of like the Trek Boers. They were original Trek Boers, weren't they? They wanted to get away from the government and jurisdiction and oversight, and they just picked up stakes and moved.
Yeah, that's exactly right. What happened was that they were treated really badly, so they decided they'd move out, and they went up north, and they set up the first human settlement north of the Orange River, which is called Griqua Town. And that's where John Campbell went in 1813 and met the people. At that time, they were called the Bastards because of their mixed race. And Campbell took offense at this, and he said, look, guys, that's not a good name. So what happened was that they decided they would be called the Griquas, because one of the leaders of the Khoikhoi, his name was Griqua. So that's where the name Griqua came from. And the town was then called, or the settlement, which was called Klaarwater originally, then became Griqua Town. But we're talking back in the very early 1800s, long before the Voortrekkers came through. And one arm of the Griquas actually moved to the Free State in the late 1818, 1819. And they settled the Free State. There were no Africans there at all. They just made up these farms, and they started. Game was their big thing, because game was everywhere. And then, of course, the Voortrekkers came through, and they had a couple of battles with the Griquas, and the British, who originally supported the Griquas and their land claims, basically said, look, we're going to leave you and the Boers to it. And of course, the Boers kicked them off their land, and that's why they landed up in East Griqualand. They went over the Drakensberg, from Lesotho into what is East Griqualand. Incredible journey they had.
That's quite a story, but it's interesting because rather unfortunate names. Some people actually embrace them to this day. Of course, a group of coloreds originally from South Africa, the Rehoboth Basters, live in Rehoboth, Namibia. And of course, they've retained the name Busters, and they're quite proud of it. A community of about 35,000,
Yeah.
40,000 now. But it is interesting if you know the origin of the word, if you know what the word means, you're like, really? That's what you call yourself? But they're quite proud of it. I mean, they kind of took the word on. People call them that, and they said, hey, fine, we're proud of it.
But you've got to also say that the spelling of Busters is Basters, whereas with the Griqua, their collective name was Bastards. So, I mean, that was much more derogatory.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, but it makes sense why they change it. It is an interesting part of history in South Africa, and as I said, I mean, I kind of call them the original four-trekkers. They were really trying to get away. They had that mentality that was, in my view, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, Scott, because you've done the research, but they had the mentality which to me is similar to the four-trekkers and to Americans who were continually moving west and expanding westwards in the manifest destiny and continually reaching out for new lands, new experiences, and spreading out. And you had the same thing with the four trekkers. Both were trying to kind of get away from authority, the faith in God, and a culture with their guns to protect themselves and feed their families. And is that similar to the Griquas? That's always the idea I had in my head.
Yeah, exactly what happened. As I said, they weren't as big a community as the Boers and the Voortrekkers that came through. But they were displaced several times, and that's why you've got small pockets of Griquas in places like Philippolis, in Griquatown, in Kokstad. And the fascinating thing about this people is you'll come across Griquas who are black as the ace of spades, and you'll come across Griquas who look like they are white, and you've got everything in between, all the different shades of color. It's quite an extraordinary mix.
It's quite a fascinating thing because people always have an idea in their mind, a picture in their mind of how people are supposed to look. But no matter where you go in the world, people look the way they look, and it's not necessarily the way you expect. When I lived in Niger, in West Africa, on the edge of the Sahel, it's obviously a black African country, but I saw people who had skin and physical appearances as light as mine who were indigenous from the country. They mixed with Arabs and Bantus, and over centuries, I saw people with green and blue eyes there who were Africans. Yeah. And I also saw, of course, lots of very dark Africans and Arabs as well. It's very interesting how people always have this idea in their mind of how people are supposed to look, and that's not really how life works.
Yeah.
So Hendo said, he said, please praat met Afrikaans, Scott and Chris. So he wants to speak more Afrikaans.
Hoe gaan dit?
There you go. No, I'll use my famous line. Ek praat nie Afrikaans nie. There you go. Now, that didn't help me when I was in Maputo one time in Mozambique, and I got stopped by the police who were desperate to shake me down for a bribe, telling me that I made an illegal turn 300 meters down the road where they couldn't see. I presented my American passport, my diplomatic passport, and my driver's license, and their broken English and Afrikaans, and then they're Portuguese, which I didn't speak at all. They tried to get me to pay for money, and I just refused. And I made the mistake of saying, when they kept saying I was a South African because my car was a hire from the airport in Joburg, and they said, "Oh, but you're Afrikaner, you're Afrikaner, South African." I mean, finally, I said, "Ek praat nie Afrikaans nie." Ah, see, you're a South African. That was a mistake, needless to say. But anyway, it worked out. It worked out all right. Hey, well, let's shift a little bit to political topics. I do want to talk a little bit about some of the charitable work you do. We'll get back to that, Scott. But sure. Big news today in South Africa. Apparently, the court is upheld the nonsensical tobacco ban in South Africa. A lot of people are asking about that in the chat so far. Are you following that story? And what are your thoughts on this Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma tobacco ban?
I heard that the ANC have tried to delay the hearing until August, haven't they?
I've seen some comments today that what has happened is that a decision was reached by the Western Cape High Court, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to double check. And it was just before we went on the stream, and I was rushing back. So part of the reason why I had a jumbled start there. But what I understood is that the court had said that it was constitutional and that she could go forward with it and continue it.
Well, I know British and American tobacco have actually started taking orders. They actually said that yesterday.
Wow. And
they would hold them on consignment for when it was made legal again. So I think people were expecting this to happen.
Well, there's a couple different cases. I think Fons just said that was the FIDA case, and then there's the BATSA case. There's a couple different cases. So, yeah, it's confusing, folks. Here in the United States, we had a federal court hand down an order today saying that the President of the United States can't use the defense budget to secure our national borders because it's a military budget. And so that's in conflict with what the Supreme Court ordered last year. So these courts, you got to wonder what's going on sometimes. So it
Well,
sounds
you've
like,
probably got lefties running them.
well, yeah, that's part of the problem here in the U.S. is lefties. Actually, it's a real serious problem. Although Trump has been very successful, he's now got over 200 federal judges appointed to the bench, which is a record number.
Fabulous.
But unfortunately, Gorsuch is okay, but his other pick for the court, Kavanaugh, has been kind of wishy-washy. And, of course, the famous non-conservative, pretend conservative John Roberts is the Chief Justice. Thank you, George Bush, for that lasting legacy of nonsense. It's more like we have the Burger Court back in the 1970s than having a true Supreme Court that's true to the Constitution. But yeah, so I guess there's a little confusion on the tobacco thing. But let's talk a little bit more about South Africa and what's going on with the lockdown. You're in touch with a lot of South Africans, as I understand, who keep you informed of events down there.
Yeah, you asking me to talk about the lockdown in South Africa?
Yes, please. Can you tell us a little about because you, like I say, you're in touch with a lot of folks and you get some insights from people who live around the country.
Well, I can tell you that the lockdown is just absolutely ridiculous, and I think people get that. If you look at the townships, if you look at the taxis, which are a petri dish for the virus, why have a lockdown? You can see the thousands of cases that are new infection cases that are happening right now in South Africa. Obviously, it's not working, and I really feel that this lockdown is actually a political ploy to bankrupt small white businesses. And then out of the ashes, what they'll do is they'll offer money to their mates in the ANC to set up black businesses to fill the gap and just leave the white community on the side. I think that's what's actually behind this. As far as what people think about the lockdown, I can tell you it's driving them crazy. And I would be absolutely... Here in Australia, I mean, there's no problem. I can go walk around. I can do what I like. But we have this coronavirus under control. I mean, our curve is just flattened off completely. We haven't had a coronavirus case or infection in Queensland now for over a week. I think we got one left in the whole of the state that is known. So that's what should be happening. But in South Africa, it's not. So I guess the big question is when will the lockdown end in South Africa? Because so many people have been inconvenienced and the whole thing is just crazy.
No, absolutely. I'm with you, Scott, on that. And I've been saying it since the outset, although I did say something complimentary that it was decisive to take action early on by the South African government. But that was quickly overruled in my mind by the sheer lunacy of this. The banning of tobacco products. Look, I don't smoke. I don't care for cigarettes at all, and I find them detestable.
Yeah.
But I don't begrudge other people smoking as long as they don't vape my space. And I think it's very callous of the National Coronavirus Command Council, the ANC government, to simply ban things without considering the fact that many people are addicted to these substances.
Well, I'll tell you where there's a huge parody here. Mm-hmm. The one is that you can have cattle auctions in South Africa, and guess who's got cattle farms? Ramaphosa. Now, they're fine. You can have cattle auctions, but they ban smoking or legal smoking. Okay, so you can buy illegal cigarettes, and guess who is one of the main players with illegal cigarettes? Edward Zuma.
Oh, Edward Zuma.
Edward Zuma, which is Jacob Zuma's eldest son. Mm-hmm. And he's got a factory in Pietermaritzburg where the cigarettes are shipped out to all these different places. He's making a killing. Now, that's Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma's stepson. So you can see how they keep it in the family. It's just extraordinary that this has not been exposed more by the mainstream media in South Africa. But then the mainstream media in South Africa are just fake news because they're so scared of the ANC.
Yeah, I've actually been calling out the media in South Africa, newspapers in particular of late, City Press for its editor-in-chief and the nonsense he said a few days ago. And then I called out the Daily Maverick today for its story claiming that lawyers in Botswana are up in arms because they've hired AfriForum's lawyer to represent Botswana in South Africa in a case that the South African government has done nothing to advance. Now, I don't really think there's much merit to the case, but I don't have all the facts. This is the one involving Bridget Motsepe Radebe, the wife of Jeff Radebe and sister of the president's spouse. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I called them out on that. So I got you. The press there are just, but I mean, that's the press everywhere, Scott. I mean, you look at the Guardian, look at BBC, look at Der
Yeah.
Spiegel. The list goes on, whether it's
Yeah.
private or
Yeah.
state-run media. It's really frustrating. Now, Linda Smith did help clarify.
I have to.
Oh, good, good.
I have to tell you,
Yeah.
I was the first one who called out the press back in 1999. I
Really?
wrote a book called Murder by Media.
Really?
And that was as a result of my being involved in the One Nation Party back in 1997 through 1998, which the local newspaper, the Courier Mail here in Brisbane, called a racist party. You know, the R word that gets pulled out when they want to try and belittle someone? Well, my book, Murder by Media, was a ripper. It sold out in about 2 months. And what happened, it was so interesting because it was in all the Dimmock stores. Now, Dimmocks are like CNA in South Africa. They've got stores everywhere. And they were selling this book. It was just going off the shelves. And all of a sudden, I got a phone call from a One Nation member on the Gold Coast. And he said, Scott, I went into the local Dimmocks to try and buy your book. And they told me it's been pulled. It's been taken out of the out of distribution or out for being for sale. So I phoned up the distribution manager at Dimmocks and said, "What's going on?" And she said, John, what is his surname? Anyway, the CEO of Dimmocks had received a phone call from Kerry Packer, who was Australia's richest man, and he was referred to in this book quite a bit because he had Channel 9, which was also full of fake news.
Mm-hmm.
And he phoned up John Forsyth, that's his name. And he phoned up John Forsyth and said, "Take that book off the shelves or I'm going to sue the ass off you." And I actually got a letter from Dimmocks a week later where they actually said, you know, we cannot afford to take on Kerry Packer. And he referred to the book called The Gambling Man, where Packer basically bankrupted everybody involved in the process of producing that book.
Wow, that's crazy. So, wow, I didn't realize you had more books. That's 2 books. Have you published any others or just the 2?
Oh, I've published 6. Yeah, I've got 6.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if we'll get into
But I'll tell you the irony about Murder by Media.
Yes.
I had an online daily newspaper that I'd been running since 1995. And that's very close to when the web came out. I mean, I just started this as like a little archive, and it grew and it grew and it grew, just like the YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. And what happened was I had a lot of people who read my daily newspaper online because they were Australians who living overseas, so they could see the local news. And when my book was banned, I put up an article about how this book had been banned and a copy of the letter that I got from Dimmocks. And all of a sudden, I got dozens of people saying, "We want your book. We want your book." And they were sending me money. And the irony was you could hardly get the book in Australia, but people overseas were buying the book. You know, this is the impact of censorship. It's just crazy.
No, it absolutely is. Well, and you have censorship by government, then you have censorship by the mob. And that's what's happening in America today. And you had that happening with Fees Must Fall and Roads Must Fall nonsense happening in the Western Cape recently in South Africa. But here it's just absolutely insane what's happening. It's going off the charts. What I was going to say a moment ago is that Linda Smith had clarified. She said today's FIDA judgment was upheld in the sense that cigarettes are still banned, but the British American tobacco case is only being heard in August, and that's where we'll probably get the confusion coming because it's 2 different cases.
That's probably what it is. Yeah,
that makes some sense. Now, My New Name said Trump's election has changed my understanding of how powerful the president is. I thought they were all powerful. No, they're not. We have a unique system here in the United States that has separation of powers, and it gives divided government intentionally so that we don't have tyranny of the majority. And we're going to have tyranny of the minority, but we're also not going to have tyranny of the majority. That's the intent. That system is under threat today by what's going on. So, yeah, I just wanted to share that really quickly. And Monkey Pushing Wood, which is a pretty interesting handle there. Monkey Pushing Wood. I would think Monkey Pushing Banana, but Monkey Pushing Wood or a palm leaf, you know. Chris, do you see any similarities with traders ripping down King George statue in 1776 and the commies in 2020 ripping down George Washington statue? Isn't it the birth of a beautiful new nation? I assume that he's being facetious with the last part of that statement. No, I don't see any similarities whatsoever. We were overthrowing an oppressive government. The United States is not an oppressive nation. Those are lies. That's pure fiction. It's utter nonsense. It's propaganda. There's a reason why over 1 million people become naturalized American citizens every year. And it's not because they come here to be oppressed. That narrative just doesn't work. Anyway, so Scott, let's shift gears a little bit if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay, so I was on your channel and you guys auctioned off this beautiful painting from someone who donated it to raise money for charity. I understand you do charity work and the money goes to different organizations in South Africa. Is that true?
We do a lot of charity work, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Look, when I first started this channel, or when I first started concentrating on South Africa on this channel, what happened was I realized that there was a need to try and help people as my subscriber base grew. And I came across a couple of charities which were looking for funding. So I started selling paintings and raised quite a lot of money. And we're still doing that today. Just this week, we sold over 50,000 rands worth of paintings with all the money going to charities in South Africa. And I think sitting in the side chat here is Marlena, who is instrumental in organizing that. She does an amazing job. Amazing woman. And to give you an example of what she's achieved, one of our channel community, because I see this as a community channel. It's not just Scott Balson's channel. I've got a lot of people in my community who work with me. And one of my community is a fellow by the name of General Isaac van Zyl, who's had a really bad time with heart ailments and he needs a triple bypass. But because the public health system in South Africa is so cactus, they can't get him in to operate, and he's really in a bad way. So Marlena told me about this, and we decided we would try and help Isaac. And as far as I know, he could now be able to afford to go and have a private hospital operation, which means that he doesn't have to wait months and months and months for this to happen. And this is largely because of the contacts we have through the channel, the networking, selling paintings and stuff like that. So that's what our focus is to help our community and also to raise funds for food parcels and things like that.
And I'm guessing that this effort's been pretty well received. People are appreciative for it, and your subscribers are pretty loyal. You've been raising quite a bit of money for folks.
Oh, look, we've got amazing subscribers. The generosity of people in our community is extraordinary. I mean, absolutely amazing.
Now, that's awesome to hear. Yeah, it's funny, Scott, because kind of like you, I don't want to say I stumbled into doing this YouTube channel because I always had an intent to do a social media presence as part of my strategic consultancy. But with lockdown starting right after I started doing these videos on my channel to support my consultancy, and that kind of going by the wayside because you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything. I noticed that, and I thought very hard about people who are going to be stuck in lockdown, stuck at home, and you can only watch so much of Netflix before it drives you insane or something like that. So I started doing the live streams, and the Stray Voltage I do was really just to talk about news in Africa, and it became much more of a focus in South Africa. And for me, it was kind of for a sense of community for folks to get a chance to answer their questions from my experiences, a look from outside of South Africa, and it really grew into something like that. So I get what you're saying about a sense of community. I really like that about this platform. It's kind of cool, and it's nice to see that. Now I'm not raising any money for charity. I wouldn't know how to begin to do that yet, but maybe I might do that at some point too. It is interesting, and so that must be very rewarding for you to have the opportunity to do that.
It is so rewarding. I mean, we have actually had some large drives where we've delivered tons of maize meal and food to largely white squatter camps because they're the people who are being ignored by the ANC government. And that is our focus. And as I say, we do support a few charities like Boere Droog to help Farmers Aid South Africa. And there are a couple of others, but those are the two main ones. And yeah, the money we've raised has made a huge difference.
There's a note here from Cyber, and it says, his ex-wife contacted me regarding the bypass. They need 280,000 rand. I started with some fundraising, also gave 5 rand K. We need help him, please. Apparently, there's still some money needed, I guess. Okay.
Yeah, well, Marlena's actually working on something which might make this all possible. I don't have the details. She's looking into this. But yeah, look, once we have more information, I'll let people know. I can tell you on Sunday night, Isaac van Zyl will be actually joining us on the live stream for a short period of time. And hopefully by then, we will have raised enough money for him to actually go ahead and have the operation privately.
Oh, excellent. Paulie just donated 14 Rand super chat and said 4,000 subs and counting. Well, thank you, Paulie. We're trying. It was a strange week this week on YouTube. I experienced a lot less people around, although it's picked up at the end of the week. I think people are trying to get back to work and not as much time on their hands to be hanging out on YouTube. That seems to have already made an impact here. Yeah, so you've got him appearing on Sunday, and tomorrow, as we talked about, you've got Giselle playing. Now, is she joining one of these jam sessions, or is it just going to be Giselle and you on the channel?
It's just going to be Giselle and Johan.
Okay, excellent.
But Johan, well, I'll be just talking to Johan and Giselle at the end, and she'll be singing. It's about an hour-long program that she'll be presenting, and oh my gosh, she has a beautiful voice.
Well, you know, she's not even the star of the family there, Scott. I don't know if you know about El Jose. Have they told you about El Jose?
No.
That's their toddler or their baby. She's 1 year old this past week or the week prior. She's amazing. Quite an interesting child. So when we did an interview on a Saturday with her, it was supposed to be an hour program, and we went for 4 hours and 20 minutes. And it was a rotation between Giselle, Johan, and then El Jose would pop in occasionally. So it was quite an interesting day. But El Jose is the rising star in that family. I just thought I'd let you know about that before you stream.
That's what you call keep it in the family.
Exactly. No, it should be fascinating to see that coming up. So let's see. Scott, you seem to have a very positive outlook on life. You've lived all over the world. You've Tanganyika. You start out. You survived the canings in school in South Africa. went to work for Barclays. You're a published author. You've been in the IT field for decades, and now you got time on your hands, and you're busy trying to draw the world's attention to what's happening in South Africa. Is that an accurate description?
That's a good summary. Yeah.
Okay, so your outlook on life, it seems pretty positive. Why are you so positive in life? Not to bring you down, but I mean, how do you maintain that positive outlook? I mean, there's a lot of bad stuff in the world. I mean, I've seen a lot of it up close and personal, sadly.
Yeah, well, look, I have a philosophy, and that is that it is what it is. If something comes your way that's a curveball, you just deal with it. And you know, I've had a really good life. I mean, I've been so fortunate. The best thing I ever did, quite honestly, was move to Australia in 1986 because I just feel so much for these people who are stuck in South Africa now with what's going on. You know, the boiling frog syndrome. When I went back there in 2007 and saw how these white suburbs had these huge fences with electric wire and you know, gates which were like, you know, for a castle, just to protect themselves. It's like going into a prison when you get home. Here in Australia, I don't bother locking the doors. I mean, yes, we do have crime. Don't get me wrong, but the crime level, I don't think I've actually met someone in recent months who has ever had a housebreak or something like that happen. You know, it's just so rare. But you go to South Africa, and there's somebody who's family member or friend or whatever, they've had a horrible incident. And that's the difference between the two countries. Huge difference.
Well, that and the malfeasance and malgovernance of the African National Congress. Yeah. There's that too. No, I get your point. Listen, I grew up in the States in all kinds of circumstances, inner cities, housing projects, rural Appalachia. And even in inner cities, I mean, we locked our doors, but you didn't have that fear, even though there's crime there. But living in just, you know, middle America, and middle America doesn't necessarily mean the middle of the country. Here is middle America in Pennsylvania. It's a heartland sort of thing. And yeah, we lock our doors, but I don't walk out the door fearful that something's going to happen to me. I don't expect to be a carjack or have to worry about people trying to come in as I go in the gate to my house. There's no gate. My neighbors can walk through my yard. They better not. I'll get a cane, but they can walk through my yard. So yeah, I get what you're saying. It's completely different. I remember I was in Paris many years ago, and what happened was I was on a flight to South Africa, and there were some Americans who were tourists, and there were a number of South Africans, a couple black South Africans, several whites, and a couple coloreds who were traveling on that flight. It was an Air France flight. And we were stuck in the lounge because there was a problem with the plane. And these Americans were like, so what's it like? We've never been. We're excited, but we've heard it's dangerous. This is 20 years ago, Scott, 2000. we heard it's dangerous in South Africa. The crime is out of control. And all the South Africans are like, that's overblown. Don't listen to that. That's just the media. People tell you that. South Africa is a safe place to go. And I turned, I looked at them like, come again? Excuse me? I didn't say that, but I just gave them that look. And so they started talking about their experiences, and so when I got carjacked, I had to get this muscle repaired because it was torn when I was thrown on the ground. Oh yeah, that scar on my leg, that's when I got shot, and when someone's coming over the wall of my house. And yeah, when my sister was raped. What are you talking about? This isn't normal. My point was that they're inured to the crime because it's just every day and ever present. And you come to live with it, and it's just a normal sort of thing, even though it's not normal. And that's really sad about South Africa. Truly, truly sad.
It is so sad, But it's people who've got the blinkers on who think that everything is still fine. They're the ones that just amuse me, because one of these days something's going to happen with their family, and it'll be a huge wake-up call for them.
Yeah, no, it's really, really, really sad. And it does happen to families every day. 60 South Africans are murdered every single day. Really sad.
Yeah.
Eileen Ailes just subscribed. Thank you so much for subscribing to the channel, Eileen. Appreciate you having you here, whether you just came in on your own volition or if you came here because you're a fan of Scott. Thank you for being a subscriber. Scott, listen, we're at 1 hour. And
before you do, how do you make that little icon come up on the top left?
Tell me how you get 70,000 subscribers, and I'll share that information. I'm just kidding. No, it's in Streamlabs. It's one of the options in Streamlabs you can call up. It's a default, depending which version of Streamlabs OBS you download, Scott. That is a default option in some of the versions. And the version I downloaded was default. Now I think it's changed. And honestly, I'd have a hard time figuring out what the setting is to get it back. But isn't that really cool? And of course, with my background there, that's the Mahalisburg Mountains near Rustenburg. And so that's the zombie climbing the Mahalisburg. That's what I like about it.
Works for me.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But Scott, we're at 1 hour. Can you stay for a few more minutes, or are you going to need to take off?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
There's no hurry. Yeah,
right,
sure.
Let me do a little bit of housekeeping once again. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, you're watching the Indaba. Sorry, the reason I do this, Scott, is I was a disc jockey many, many years ago in my youth. I hate to say many, many years ago in my youth because I'm used to just saying when I was younger. But many, many years ago in my youth, I was a disc jockey at a radio station. Of course, in the U.S., the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, requires that you announce your radio station at the top of every hour. So, and every half hour we used to do it. So every half hour, an hour, because people tune in and out. So that's what I'm doing now. So folks, you're listening to the Indaba Africa
Before
channel.
Before you do, Chris, I need to go to the little boy's room, so I'll do that
go ahead
while
and
you're
do that.
talking.
Well, we've got a nice background with your picture there. Okay. All right, folks. So that's Scott Balson taking a break for the loo. He ran to the loo. So fair enough. You're listening to Indaba Africa. This is Chris Wyatt in central Pennsylvania. I'm talking to my special guest today on the special feature, Scott Balson, who lives in Australia, was born in Tanganyika in Dar es Salaam, grew up there, and then was sent to South Africa for boarding school, for primary and secondary school, wound up living in South Africa after that, after his parents moved from Tanganyika, which became Tanzania, to South Africa. He grew up there and then went to worked for Barclays and did some other things in South Africa, and eventually moved to Australia in the mid-1980s. And he's been there ever since, but he does get back to South Africa periodically. Scott is a published author. We've talked about 2 of his books here, including Children of the Mist, about the Greek people, and also Murder by Media, which is about the dishonest mainstream media. He wrote that back in the 1990s. That's interesting. So Scott Balson, my special guest. If you're just tuning in for the first time ever to this channel, welcome. And if you're not a subscriber, feel free to subscribe. It costs nothing. If you're interested in becoming a member of the channel, and I'd like to do a little housekeeping on that right now. So since the last time we had members added, 2 people have become members of Chris White Africa, and that's Lee Lowe and Dachshund's Rule. I'm guessing Dachshund's Rule is a fan of dachshunds. Used to have a small little dachshund when I was a kid. So my many, many profuse thanks to Lee Lowe and Dachshund's Rule for becoming part of the Chris White Africa channel. I really appreciate that. Anyone's interested in that, It's really low cost. It's not about the money. Trust me, not making much money off of it. YouTube gets their cut. Set it very low. If you're in South Africa, every country is different based on the currency, but South Africa, it's like 10 Rand to become a member. There's other levels if you want to do that. But anyway, you're welcome to become a member, folks. I welcome anyone that wants to join the channel. As long as people are respectful and honest, you're welcome to be here. And if those who follow my channel for a while, you know that I'm even tolerant of trolls. I will tolerate trolls as long as they're not disrespectful or they spew any hatred or something like that. I will tolerate them. So anyway, yeah, there you go. So Scott's almost back with us, and we'll get
Okay, I'm back.
He's back. All right, so
Just in case anybody wants to know what I'm drinking, it's called water.
Heinrich, I thought it was gin. No, Heinrich Becker.
Actually, I never touch spirits. I've never drunk spirits in my life.
Really? Do you touch alcohol at all? Beer or wine?
Oh yeah. I love sparkling wine. That's a cool drink. I enjoy that.
Can you get South African wines in Australia?
Yes, you can. You can get everything here. You can get biltong. You can get Omar rusks. You name it. You can get it here.
Yeah, we can actually get biltong here in the States now. It's actually made by South Africans that have come to the States. They make biltong. It's good. I wouldn't say it's as good as what you get in South Africa, but it's pretty good. So
nothing to beat game biltong, that's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So let's see. Monkey Pushing Wood has a question here, Scott. Let me pull it up really quickly here. Mm-hmm. And Monkey Pushing Wood, I still get a kick out of that name. There's some really cool handles on YouTube. Like Doc Breaker is a really good one. I love that handle. Just a Ghost. I love that one. And Monkey Pushing Wood. These are really cool. These folks are clever. But the question is, Scott, did you run into any refugees from Rhodesia? And did he give any forewarning about what's coming to South Africa? And what warning would someone from Europe learn from those failed nations? That's a multi-part question. So I guess when you were in South Africa growing up, did you meet anyone who fled from Rhodesia before it became Zimbabwe in 1980 would be my guess here. And did you get any forewarning about what was coming for South Africa?
Not really. I went to Rhodesia in 1973, and wow, what a beautiful country it was back then. That's when it was under UDI and Ian Smith. And I will never forget my first night in what was then Salisbury. I was staying at the Monomatapa Hotel. It was a Saturday night, and being a young man, I was about 19 years old. I asked the concierge if there were any clubs around the place, and he said, yes, there's one actually just around the corner. And so I went down to the club, or went into the club, and there were about 100 people there. And I took a double check. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They were all young women. There wasn't one man in the place.
Okay.
Because all the men were fighting on the borders.
Ah.
And I walked in there, and it was like I felt like I was some kind of a pop star. Everyone wanted to dance with me. It was quite extraordinary. Yeah.
Well, that's a little bit.
You know, it's like you've landed in heaven, and the Rhodesian girls were so beautiful. You know, like the South African girls.
Well, that's a little bit different than when I was in West Africa, in Liberia, post-conflict Liberia, where we're rebuilding the armed forces of Liberia, and you go out and you go to these restaurants, or you see people going to bars, and some of these expats are there, and they think they're rock stars. Their teeth falling out, massively overweight, receding hairlines. They think they're Rock Hudson or, I don't know, Matt Damon or something. Only to realize that those ladies are desperate. There's no one else around, and so you're not quite that attractive. I'm not talking about your Rhodesian experience. My point is that you get an artificial situation like that. Well, in this case, all the guys were out in the bush fighting. It's a very different dynamic. In West Africa, when nobody had any money, very different dynamic. So I did see some chat in here, and I need to stop this right now, Scott. So you got to give me a second here. All right, this is serious, ladies and gentlemen. Listen, I don't want this is a Marmite-free zone tonight. I don't want to hear about Vegemite. I don't want to hear about Marmite. None of that nonsense. No Marmite, no Vegemite. Save that UK and Australian stuff for other people. No, I'm just kidding. We had this I don't know, it just went crazy the other night in the chat where I was talking about real serious news events, and I look over in the chat and everything is about Marmite and Vegemite. I don't know where that came from, and I just saw it mentioned again, so I thought I'd try to put a stop to it, which of course means every comment will be about Marmite.
I can tell you now where it comes from, Chris.
Okay.
Because you've got the Loving Life family in here watching.
Uh-huh.
And when I have a live stream, they're talking about everything but. I mean, there was one discussion, I think it was Mel and Erica, where they were saying, oh, I hear that Mel has just got engaged. And, of course, there was a long discussion about that in the side chat because they all know each other. And it's actually quite fun because it just shows how close the community is.
No, absolutely. I saw Captain Seakelt, which is kind of a cool name too. He's in Scotland, if I'm not mistaken. Captain Seakelt mentioned something about South Africans settled across London, and then Hendo says over 260,000 UK. Yeah, no, there's about 200 and there's more than 260,000 South African citizens living in the UK. Significantly more than that. It's at least about 400,000, if not more. But yeah, there are quite a few folks from South Africa. And it's interesting because it's not just, English or Afrikaans speaking South Africans. It's the South Africans of all stripes have been moving there. If you go to Canary Wharf, you'll find a lot of South Africans working in Canary Wharf, as well as a number of Zimbabweans. So Keith Alderson had a question for both of us, Scott, and I'll let you dive into this first. He's asking about Orania. Any thoughts on Orania or opinions on it?
Well, I think Orania is really the pilot case for what other white communities should be doing in South Africa, because it's the only town in South Africa that's run properly. It's the only one that doesn't have any debt, and you don't have to be a genius to understand why. You look at all the ANC-run municipalities; they're all bankrupt. They're all in administration. They've all been completely the service delivery is completely gone. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's because you got ANC cadres running the thing. It is Orania to me is a fabulous little town. One of my few regrets is that I have actually never been to Orania. I drove past it on my way to Bloem, but it was quite a long drive to the left, and so I didn't go. But I do wish that I had gone, because it is such a unique little outpost. And really, now you've got these ANC cadres saying that this can't be allowed to continue. We've got to shut down Orania because it represents just the white community. And you can understand why the white community are looking for places like this, because of the way their towns have been treated. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, yeah, and it's not just towns. I mean, you've openly discriminated. I mean, you see this nonsense taking place with BEE for years now, but it's even gone beyond that now. Now you have the big companies that they're BEE certified, and they won't hire minority-owned businesses that aren't BEE certified because they don't want to fall into disfavor with the ANC and jeopardize their contracts, which there's no legal bearing to do that. But then beyond that, with the lockdown, you see the Tourism Relief Fund is set up to help the tourism industry, and the majority of businesses in tourism sector are actually minority-owned businesses, white, Indian, primarily, and they deny funds to them, and they take it to the court, and the North Gauteng High Court says it's not discriminatory. I don't know what these people are smoking. I mean, they're smoking something that's not healthy, that's for sure. But let me
well, I have to tell you, Chris.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have to tell you, it's not a rainbow nation, that's for sure.
No, and you see a president who is leading the charge into racial discrimination and racialization of every sphere of the economy. This guy who's got $450 million net worth, and I know some people are going to say, no, he's worth $1 billion. Okay, we're not talking rands, we're talking dollars, and there's different sources. The most reliable number source I can find is he's worth less than $500 million. But you know what? That's about $500 million more than I'm worth. So, I mean, I'm not going to quibble about that. But anyway, it's interesting that after he profits to the tune of $500 million, he now decides that South Africa's economy is racist and colonialist, and it must be transformed because he got his and he got to be president. So it's just frustrating. But on my response to Orania, listen, I think all the videos and all the news reports I've read, interviews I've heard with people in Orania, most of whom it's done in Afrikaans, so I can keep up, but I don't get everything. So unless there's subtitles, sometimes I lose a little bit. But everything I've ever seen in Orania, I have no beef. It's in compliance with South African law. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. This is something that makes sense, and people claim that it's a racist place and others aren't welcome. But Afrikaans-speaking coloreds have been able to move there and be part of the community. So, I don't know if it's a model for other places, but certainly I have no objections to Orania, and they seem to have their act together. It run more like a business than anything else, which makes a lot of sense to me. Now, Sean Mandich said that every time that he's in the U.S., he gets the feeling like he's in the 1980s because stuff's just lying in the yard and not seeing burglar bars. Yeah, like kids leave their bicycles in their front yard here. Nobody steals it, Now, I'd like to smack them in the back of the head for leaving their bicycles in front yards, but, we don't steal their bicycles.
Well, I have to tell you, Chris,
yeah.
I've got a huge fridge that sits outside my house. It's undercover. Uh-huh. But anyone could wheel it away. It's on wheels. It's been there now for 8 months. never been touched.
Really? And
And,
so,
it's just sitting there.
Scott, your address is, what's your address now?
Good luck.
I mean, I could use a fridge. No, but seriously. So, Bruce Boster said the unofficial figure of SAFAs in UK is 500,000. Yeah, that's more an accurate figure. The data is not reliable, but yeah, that's closer to the truth, I think, than 260. And Bruce also said, Chris and Loving Life, Scott, what's the possibility of you guys starting organizations in your countries to help South Africans get out? When I get to the UK, I'll do the same. So Bruce is planning on leaving, apparently. Now, I guess that's an apropos question because we see Katie Hopkins is actively trying to help South Africans. Well, I mean, you wouldn't know this from Twitter because she's permanently banned from there, but you can find her on Parler. But Katie Hopkins is actively working to try to help South Africans immigrate to an unmentioned East European freezing country and the Philippines. I wouldn't be, Philippines not my first destination, but so what would be the possibility of us starting organizations? Was that something you'd be interested in, Scott? I mean, that's a pretty big undertaking.
Well, let me just start off by saying that Katie Hopkins took that video down because one of the people involved in that video turned out to be very unsavory. I'm not going to say any more than that, but
no, okay.
That's what happened to that video. If you go to my channel and have a look at videos from the last couple of days, you'll get a bit of the background information on this.
Okay.
But, as far as setting up organizations in places like Australia, the problem is that in Australia, for example, we've got the Greens, which are the loony lefty. They're like the Democrats in America. And if you even suggest that they bring in the minority South Africans into Australia, they will just jump up and down like spoiled kids and say, no, not going to happen. This is the problem we have. It is so biased, the politics in Australia.
No, it's a similar situation here. People absolutely lost their minds when it came out in John Bolton's treasonous book. Yeah, I did say that treasonous. He didn't bother to get his pages reviewed for classification authority. I had to do that for my books, so screw him.
Yeah.
I don't know who he thinks he is. So John Bolton in his treasonous book has mentioned that supposedly Donald Trump was planning on giving asylum to white South Africans, and there was a kibosh put on it. I don't know what the truth is, whether Trump was talking about it or if it's a typical thing where Trump he's like me, he's got stray voltage. You just say what's on his mind and then ask people to check into it. Yeah, I heard we could put a man on the moon. Look into that, Eric.
I love that term, stray voltage.
Well, it's just random neurons firing. That was kind of the idea because it kind of became, the idea was to kind of be kind of a chew the fat sort of session. People got questions, I'll answer them. And since I have experience and background in a lot of different areas, I can answer questions about a lot of things. And so that's kind of where it came from. It just seemed to be, actually, when I first started doing it, I would put the little, the marquee up and I had lightning bolts in the background. But now I just pick photographs of places I've been and outdoor scenes, and it seems to do the trick. People seem to like it.
Yeah.
So let me see if there was something else here I wanted to get from the chat. There was something else. I didn't want to miss it here. See an exorcism guy in Scott's. What's this? Oh, I don't know about that. What you're talking about there, I didn't see that. UK has too many lefties. We all have too many lefties. It's not just the UK. Australia has too many lefties. Wouldn't you say, Scott?
Absolutely.
Yep. All right. So listen, a published author, IT guy, now a full-time. I mean, when I say full-time, dude, you've got videos popping up all the time. People are always asking me because I'm up in the morning when it's morning time in South Africa, but it's the middle of the night here. And do you ever sleep? I have to ask you that question, Scott. Do you ever sleep?
Okay. Well, look, I'll tell you my daily routine. I get up every morning at 2:30 in the morning. I've got to tell you, I don't have a life, okay? And I've been doing this now for over a year. I get up at 2:30 in the morning. I start looking at emails. I start going through the links I'm sent. And, hey, guys, thank you so much for the emails you send me, the information you send me. That's what makes my job so much easier. I get videos sent to me. And I go through all these. I get hundreds every day. So a lot of my day is actually spent going through hundreds of emails, looking at the links, looking at the information. And so I get up at 2:30. I break for breakfast at about after 8 a.m. because that's when people in South Africa are going to sleep. It's midnight their time. And then I come back to what I'm doing, putting up videos, and so that when people get up in the morning, all those videos are ready for them. But no, my day is literally 12 plus hours a day working on the YouTube channel. And of course, I've got WhatsApp that I go to, and it's people now want me to set things up on Telegram. They don't realize I've only got 24 hours in the day. I mean, I'm stretched so thin at the moment, it's ridiculous.
No, it does take up a lot of time. I think people who haven't actually ever sat down and made a video actually are aware of the process if you do it professionally, if you do it seriously. I mean, like for my videos, and I asked this of you, kind of an angle, but with my videos, when I do it, I'm always checking my facts and looking for, sources for things to put out there. And so that takes time. And you want to make, I've got whiteboards here, so I keep track, whiteboards, events. And for the videos, I'll make notes and make sure that I've got my highlights so I can go through it without reading from a script, because I don't need to read from a script, because that's just a better dressed chimpanzee. You don't read from a script. I don't read from a script. You might read some highlights from a news article, and I'll do the same, but I don't really like when people are just reading from a script. So it takes a lot of time, and I don't think people appreciate that. So for your videos, Scott, you obviously have a lot of people that you know in South Africa, the sources for your stuff, but do you rely on other things too, like printed material, or also newspapers or media sources, or how do you put your videos together from sourcing standpoint, if you don't mind?
Well, basically what I do is I look at a theme that is happening in South Africa, and then I tend to focus on that and get from various news reports information that relates to that, and then put up a video. If there's a video clip that someone sent me, all the better, because I can then put that in, and it just adds substance to the article. So, it depends. Every video is different. Mm-hmm. Every video is different.
No, I got you. It's but making them takes a lot of time. I think people should need to appreciate. They need to appreciate that. Now I don't edit any of my videos. The only editing I do is now I put a streamer in the front and an open intro and outro. That's all I put on there. But if I make a mistake in the video, there's a mistake in there. If I say something correct, I change it. Do you? I know a lot of people edit their videos, and frankly, the reason I don't edit my videos is I'm just trying to be natural. I get the impression that most of your videos are just natural, or do you ever have to edit them, get lost in your thoughts sometimes?
Yeah, look, I edit quite a few of my videos, and I'll tell you why. It's because I'm blind in the one eye, and I've got macular degeneration in the other eye, so my ability to read off a screen it's okay, because I'm getting injections in the eye every month now to stop the degeneration, but sometimes my eye doesn't focus properly, so I've got to stop, and then I've got to stop the video and start again. And I'm lucky because I can actually merge different videos, so it's not a huge issue, but it's time consuming.
Well, it's a shame.
Part of the process of putting it up.
Shame, Scott. Sorry to hear that. That's got to be difficult, and it makes it more challenging to make your videos. You're dealing with something that I don't have to worry about for my videos, so that's a challenge.
Yeah.
So somebody asked a little while ago, if you don't mind, because we've talked about two of your books, and when you were up to the loo, see, I can use the lingo. When you were up to the loo, I mentioned your book, Murder by Media, and then also Children of the Mist. So someone asked, can we mention your other four books, if you don't mind, before we close out this evening? I want to just let people know about your other four books. What are the titles of the other four books?
Sure. After Murder by Media, I produced a book called One Voice, Many Issues, which really got the lefties excited, because in there I basically included an article under the gay debate by a doctor who talked about what gays get up to and the diseases they get because of the things they do. And it was just absolutely disgusting. And I put this article into my book, One Voice, Many Issues, and of course the lefties and they were beside themselves. Then I produced a book called Inside One Nation, which was basically an expose of what happened to the One Nation Party, because in 1999, 2000, the whole thing fell apart. I had my book Enemy of the State, which was that's a very interesting chapter in my life, actually. As I told you, I had my online newspaper where I got all this information, then produced the book Murder by Media. And the response by the Courier Mail to me producing that book, unlike Kerry Packer, was not to get it banned by Dimmicks, but they targeted me personally. And what they did was they put this nefarious charge that I had on my online newspaper named the deputy speaker as a man facing child sex charges. And in Queensland, uniquely, that is technically an offence. And I was arrested. And this is like a speeding fine offence. It's like it's not one that you arrest someone over. But I got arrested. I mean, they took me through the whole 9 yards. I had my house searched. They took a copy of my computer hard drive with them. It was just so intrusive and so intimidating what went on. And I went through 3 trials. And the speed of my arrest for exposing Darcy, who actually landed up going to prison for 7 years.
Wow.
And as partially as a result of my raising the noise, because I knew the One Nation politicians, and they told me what was going on. And of course, everyone was protecting this guy because they needed him to keep their position in power in Queensland. So the long and the short of it was, I went through 3 trials, and after the 3rd trial, and I represented myself. The magistrate, by the way, the fine was $500. That's the maximum fine that you had to pay. I mean, the whole thing was ridiculous. But the magistrate threw the case out, said, this guy is not guilty. This is totally ridiculous. Why have you targeted this man when I see in the paper every day the same sort of thing happening? Well, there's something wrong with the police department. And of course, it was because they targeted me. So that book, Enemy of the State, is actually about that experience.
Wow.
And the final book that I wrote is called The Griqua Coinage, which is actually about all the different coinages that the Griq was used over the years. And that's actually a very, very interesting book.
I had no idea about this story about Enemy of the State and what happened there. That's fascinating. It reminds me of you've probably seen the Australian drama series Secret City. Do you know that one?
No.
Oh no, that's an Australian series that came out in 2016 and 2018. I don't know if they're going to do another series. It's about corruption in the Australian government, and so it's focused on Canberra and all the machinations going on behind the scenes, and China's a player in here, and there's like a Manchurian candidate who's one of the MPs who was actually a Chinese plant, and anyway, it seems like Australians are kind of like Americans and Brits. They really enjoy a good spy novel or a good spy television series and that sort of thing. But yeah, Secret City. So that's wow, I had no idea about that. That's interesting, Scott. Thanks for sharing that.
Well, there's actually a 3-part video documentary on YouTube, which you can go and see. If you type in Enemy of the State and Scott, it'll actually take you straight to it. And you can actually see firsthand what happened. It's quite an extraordinary story.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of us are going to go check that out. Because I think of Enemy of the State, of course, that's the movie with Will Smith, the NSA trying to get everybody. So, but I'd be remiss if I don't. We had a super sticker here a few moments ago from Just a Ghost. He gave a super sticker with a little hippo sliding around in his office chair. 70 Rand. Thank you so much for that, Just a Ghost. Really appreciate it. It's very kind of you. I love those super stickers. They're actually kind of funny. And Chesney Thomas has just become a member of the site. Well, thank you so much for becoming a member of Chris White Africa. I really appreciate that. So, folks, you're listening to Scott Balson here on Indaba Africa with Chris White on the Chris White Africa channel. And we've been talking for about 90 minutes about Scott's life, his experiences. And, wow, time just flies when you're enjoying the conversation. I've been enjoying it, Scott. I hope it's been enjoyable for you.
I love it. Yeah, it's been great.
It's these books you've got are fascinating. I think a lot of us are going to go check some of these things out here. Especially The Murder by Media really has my attention, as does Enemy of the State. Those are two fascinating. Not that any of the others are less fascinating, Scott. Just those two really pique my attention.
Right.
Do you have a favorite?
My favorite book?
Yes.
Oh, it would be Children of the Mist.
Okay. That's kind of I would think that was kind of like not a personal journey, but one that's very rewarding because you brought to light some history that's really been neglected.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so Tianes, can we get Scott's books? I don't know. Are they still in print? I know the one was taken off the shelves in Australia. Is there a website somewhere? Or I guess how do we get your books, Scott, if we want to get them?
Well, if they just send me an email at homestays@gmail.com, I can talk to them about it, because the problem is postage costs. You know, when you buy a book and you send it from Australia to South Africa, for example, it adds quite a bit to the price. It's about $20 on top for the postage.
What about digitizing, Scott? Have you considered that and putting it on a platform like Amazon or something like that? You know, those Black Lives Matter supporters, Amazon?
No, I haven't. No, I've just my focus has really been it was my business, and then now it's obviously YouTube. So I really haven't worried about that at all.
Paulie asked, he said, I guess Paulie's alluding to Sunday. I have Big Daddy Liberty on my stream on Sunday. He's my guest. And Paulie's asking if you have any recommendations what I should discuss with Big Daddy Liberty. I take it he was on your channel recently?
Yeah, he was. He's a lovely guy. I think probably anything to do with the lockdown would certainly get him going.
Get him triggered.
Get him triggered, yeah.
Yeah, no, I've subscribed to his channel as well, and I've watched a few of his videos, and he definitely can, like a lot of us, can get triggered on a topic and just go on a riff for a long time about it. So I found it very entertaining. But people have been begging me to get him on my channel for a couple months. So even when I had just a few hundred subscribers, like, you got to get Big Daddy Liberty on here. You guys need to go at it. And I'm like, okay, who's Big Daddy Liberty? I didn't know who he was at the time. Kind of a cool name, but anyway, so I wrote to him, and anyway, long story short, I had a third party who's a friend of his intervene, and now he's on my channel Sunday.
Fantastic.
Yeah, okay, so the lockdown would be a good topic. Thanks for that one. I appreciate that insight. Really, banana lives matter. Somebody's trying to be funny there. Break, loot, murder. Well, that's like, you have heard it's not the African National Congress, but rather the angry, naughty children. That's what the ANC is.
I haven't heard that one before.
Angry, naughty children. That's right. Speaking of caning individuals. Anyway, well, Scott, it's fantastic. Is there anything you can share with us that I haven't asked? I've asked you quite a bit about your life, about your charity work, your books, your broadcast. Have I missed anything? Are you like an aviation buff? Are you into science fiction or space? You into astronomy? You've had a very interesting life so far.
I actually have a very boring life because, as I said just now, I don't have a life because most of my life is on my YouTube channel. But I'm a soldier for the minority groups in South Africa. I love getting their emails. I love the links they send me because I do go through them all. And I do respond to every email I get. I do occasionally miss one. But yeah, that to me is very important. I guess I've been a bit of a researcher all my life, so it's and also having my online newspaper from 1995 to 2000. I've got a kind of a niche area that I enjoy doing, and this is part of it.
Scott, you mentioned that's actually, I don't think people really heard you when you said that. Some people that, you had an online newspaper from 1995 to 2000. I mean, the first graphic-based web browser was Mosaic in 1994. And the World Wide Web, as you mentioned, I think you termed it correctly, the World Wide Web woke up to the internet in 1994-95. And so you already had a newspaper on there. And of course, for a lot of us who were transitioning from dial-up and dial-up services and bulletin board services and things like that, and that was a whole sea change. And then, of course, the rest of the world was introduced to it. But that was early on. How was that venture, that online newspaper? Did you have a lot of followers or subscribers to it? Why'd you give it up? It just became too much, or what?
Huge. No, what actually happened was News Limited were not happy. News Limited run the Courier Mail. Mm-hmm. And they're the ones who targeted me in that court case I was telling you about. Mm-hmm. After that court case, I actually had a call from one of the reporters, and he said, Scott, I'm going to give you the best advice anyone ever gave you. And he said, look, News Limited are watching like a hawk everything you do on your online daily newspaper. And he said, the best advice I can give to you is to give it up. Don't do it anymore, because they're going to find something else and something else and something else, and they're just going to keep on either they'll sue you or they'll get you into court again. He said they're going to try and cause shit, and that's why I gave up in 2000. But I've got to tell you that the National Library of Australia have recognized my online newspaper as a treasure. They've actually got it in their archives, digital archives, and you can actually go and look at every single newspaper I put up from 1995 daily to 2000. It's actually there in the National Library of Australia.
Oh, that's absolutely
Cool.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Excellent. There was something here. I didn't want to forget it. What? Okay, never mind. I don't know what somebody had something to say, but no, that's fantastic to hear, Scott. I mean, those were really exciting times. 95 to about 2002 or 2000 for sure. Really, really exciting times on the internet.
Yeah.
And so back then, you were obviously using a dial-up modem to get into service.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was that. I remember those days. I was talking to someone yesterday about 2400 baud modems. Like what? Yeah, 2400 baud modems. That's what
You could actually watch when you typed. You could actually see it sort of slowly going through.
Exactly.
Crazy.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. Well, that's pretty interesting, and that you share that with us. Thanks a lot for that, Scott. I appreciate it. Well, I think maybe we should wrap it up and give you've got other videos probably to prep for and things to do today. I don't want to cut you off. If you want to go longer, we can, but I think we probably should call it at this stage because, Scott, here's a word of warning. I have a habit of going for 3 or 4 hours, and I know we want to do that. That's not going to be fair to you. So,
No, we can't do that, unfortunately.
no, so let me give you a chance to add anything when we wrap up, any comments or things you want to say other than you got Giselle on tomorrow. That's going to be fantastic. Tell us about that, and then just anything you want to close out with.
Well, we've got live streams lined up for the next few days, every night at 8 p.m. And they're going to be on a variety of subjects, and I'll alert people if they just watch for my scheduled videos that I'll put up. I just want to thank you, Chris. I think you're doing a fantastic job where you are in America helping South Africans and also alerting Americans as to what's going on in South Africa. That has been one of the major aims of my channel from the very start, is to, because of the media cover-up of what's happening, is to get the message out there. And I think since I've started, a lot of people have actually now started YouTube channels with a similar theme. And I know copycatting is basically showing that you're doing something right. And I don't mind that at all. Because the more people actually alerting the world as to what's actually happening in South Africa, the better. Apart from that, as I say, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed myself. And hopefully we'll be chatting again soon on the live stream in the future.
No, absolutely, Scott. You're welcome to come back on my channel, and I'd be happy to come back on your channel at some point if you'd like me back as a guest to talk about some topic that's apropos rather than just this interview. I want to do this because I have subscribers in the U.S. who aren't familiar with you and other parts of the world, and I wanted to kind of do this interview where people learn about you. So we've done that, and we've talked a little bit about issues, but maybe in the future we can talk about things that are going on at the moment and focus on that.
Yeah. And just one final thing, if I may, Chris.
Yeah.
I just want to thank all my subscribers who are here and watching. Thank you for being part of the live stream tonight. And if people do want to find my channel, all they've got to do is type Loving Life into the search on YouTube, and you'll see this little black round thing with subscribe. Alongside it, you click on the channel and have a look. You're very welcome to come and join us.
Excellent. Scott, I'm going to drop you off, okay? And I'll call you back in a few minutes after I close the stream. Is that all right?
Sure, not a problem.
All right, folks, say farewell to Scott. Thank you so much for being our
Cheers,
guest.
guys.
You've been a great guest. Take care.
Thank you, mate.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Scott Balson from Loving Life and in Australia. There's a good thumbs up. I love that. That's awesome. I should just leave that up. That's beautiful, Scott, right there. But yeah, so let me close out here, ladies and gentlemen, and say thank you so much for tuning into Indaba Africa this evening in South Africa, tomorrow morning in Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and this afternoon here on the East Coast of the United States on a Friday. For those of you in South Africa, I know it's evening. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will do a Stray Voltage live stream because I want to talk a little bit about Scott's appearance on the program and also highlight upcoming things. So I'll do that in an hour. So it's now 9:40 in South Africa. At 10:40, I'll do a live stream. I'll try to keep it to an hour or less so people can hit the rack. But thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you so much, Scott, for being my guest. I really appreciate it. It was fascinating to hear about your books. We didn't know about some of those things, and really enjoyed learning about that. And also, you shared your views about Irania and also some of the political things taking place in South Africa. So, folks, you've been listening to Indaba Africa on the Chris White Africa channel. Thank you to the new members who joined the channel. Really, really appreciate that. And also for the super chats and super sticker. Very kind of folks to do that. And I just want to make sure people get credit for that before we run off. Not that people do it for credit, but you know, when people support your channel, whether you become a member or you're a subscriber, people should thank them. So I want to thank Doxson's Rule and Linda Lowe for becoming members today. Really appreciate that. And let's see, we had the Dodgy Idealist who gave a chat. Was that today? I'm making sure I got it right. Oh, that was yesterday. Paulie gave a super chat today. So my super chats are wrong. They're not up to date here. Sorry about that, folks. Yeah, Paulie gave one. Handy Dutchman gave one. But I think that's from yesterday. Anyway, well, thank you all so much. My super chats are not up to date, but thank you for the super stickers. I know there's a few of them during the stream. And I really appreciate you guys being here. As I said, I will go live in about an hour, and we'll do a straight voltage. And thank you so much for that. By the way, folks, those who are Loving Life fans of Scott, if you came over to watch the stream tonight, thank you very much. Really appreciate you popping in and checking it out. I hope you enjoyed the stream. Scott was a good guest and an enjoyable guest. I appreciate you coming over. You're welcome to subscribe to my channel. I appreciate that. All of my loyal subscribers on the channel and my members, thank you so much for being here. Really do appreciate it. And remember, tomorrow on Loving Life, Giselle, the Afrikaans musician from Namibia. She's a Boermeisie. And she is amazing. She sings some amazing songs. Sight Vest, Fitlins Mensa, the list goes on and on. She will be on Loving Life tomorrow, so check it out. I'll be watching it. Whatever hour it's on, I will definitely be watching it. After I give Johan a ration for not telling me about the booking. No, I'm just kidding. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for this stream. Thank you so much for tuning in. God bless wherever you are. I hope you're safe. Your friends and family are well. We are approaching the 4th of July here in the United States. The 244th anniversary of our Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. Next Saturday, my guest will be Major General Johan Justa from South Africa, and he'll be my guest on Independence Day here in South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, God bless, and some of you I'll see